This is just a message for anyone who needs to find it, to tell you that you are a powerful, amazing spiritual being. You're an eternal spiritual being, a loving part of the divine, having this human experience, this temporary, maddening, crazy human experience. You've got God within you. You're stronger than you could possibly imagine. You have all the power you need to make all the decisions that you need. And sure, sometimes we need to go outside of ourselves for a little bit of help from others. But otherwise, you've got the power within. You've got the divine within. You can access the answers by going within, by meditation, prayer, all of that. You are loved more than you could possibly imagine. You are a loving part of the divine. Your soul is incorruptible. And you're on a spiral path. So sometimes you come across unimaginably difficult quests on this earth, tests of your patience, tests of your sanity. Sometimes you come across obstacles so great you think you can never get past them. But then once you do, you become stronger as a result. And we're all on the spiral path. So very often you'll meet the same obstacle again, many years later, maybe in some instances. But you'll realise that you've levelled up, you've learnt so very much, that what once may have been a great boulder is now just a tiny pebble that you can just walk over, no problems at all. Every time you come through difficult circumstances, you level up. Every single time that you find strength within, where you thought you couldn't do a thing and then you do it, you level up. When you achieve something, you level up. It isn't about material stuff. It isn't about what you can accumulate, how shiny your car is, any of that really truly matters. But everything that you carry inside, everything that you have learned, all the love that is all that you are, is what matters. And who you are on the inside is what matters. And what you take with you when you pass is all of that. And if you've learnt love, if you've learnt to love, even though sometimes life batters you, and if you've learnt to open your heart more, even in the midst of great difficulty, then you're on the right path as far as I'm concerned. So long as you've also learned fantastic boundaries and how to take care of yourself, and you've learned that you don't have to take any bullshit from anyone, and that you can walk away with great skill and maybe love in your heart if needs be, but that you will protect yourself as well as you would protect a loved one or a good friend. And that you can still love in your heart, even though you've lost people in your life that you loved very much indeed. But you can still love, you can still hold on to love. And if you needed to take a step back from life for a while and shut down from life for a while, there's no shame in that. That's absolutely fine. But that one day you can find the courage to step forward even just a little again. Open your heart even just a little again. And if you can't do that, there's no shame there either. It's hard. Earth School is hard. It's hard on everyone. No one comes out of it unscathed. We're all a little bit scathed. It's tough and it's hard. But if you can still love, and if you can still care for others and animals too, and Mother Nature as well, then you're fine. Then it doesn't matter what your external circumstances look like to some degree. Of course it does matter in terms of you need to take care of yourself, and you need to be taken care of by circumstances, by life to some extent. You need a roof over your head, you need the basics. You need enough food, you need all of the physical needs met. But the important thing is not the accumulation of wealth. The important thing is not how many cars you have, or what title you have at work, but who you are in here. And if you're a good person, that is everything. That is everything. I'm sure half the billionaires of this world are not happy. They're probably just deeply discontented. There probably exists some form of vacuum where deep happiness resides, because they mistook happiness for material wealth. And they mistook competition for heart-centered values. And they thought that being successful was everything, when it isn't. If you're still here after you've been brought to your knees by life and you can still love, then you are a success. Then you're a success. So just go easy on yourself today. Just take heart that you're a good person and a lovely human, and that your being here matters so very much in this world, this broken world, where there is so much suffering. So many people who do not know that they are divine sparks of God, because this world seeks to keep us small. Because if we think we are just these little beings that just die at the end of our lives, that there is no other realm, the spiritual realm doesn't exist, it helps keep people small, right? Because then they think this is all there is. And then they place great primacy on material wealth and on things that don't really matter. And then they lean on the systems that seek to exploit the heck out of them. So stand tall in who you are and take back your power from anyone who seeks to take it away from you in whatever way, you know. So many people will seek to disempower you in this life, some intentionally and some not. Some intentionally in nefarious ways, and some simply being a bit exploitative, or simply being, you know, trying to tout for business and wanting your attention. And in wanting your attention, they might need you to be disempowered so that you seek advice from them and not from within yourself. So many places, so many institutions, so many companies, so many gurus, so many teachers will have this sort of approach. They have to tell you where they think you are lacking, get you to believe that. Then you can rely on them, and then you'll give them your money and you'll give them your personal agency too. And then you'll disempower yourself in the process by thinking that they've got the answers you seek. Psychics too, in some instances, if they're not very skilled, and especially all the exploitative ones all over TikTok who are masquerading as other people, who will come in and try to tell you where you're vulnerable, where you're lacking, and hope that they catch you in a moment of weakness, that you might give them your money so that they can give you promises or give you, you know, hopes that may or may not come true. The real hope is in the knowledge of the eternal. The real hope is in the knowledge of what's real, which is that love is at the centre of everything. Love is at the heart of everything. There is only love. There is only love. I had a spiritual experience once where my ego dissolved into a greater sea of consciousness, the greater sea of consciousness that we're all in. And I experienced love, loving bliss off the charts. Can't even put it into any adequate words. It was so beautiful, so beautiful. But that's what we live in all of the time. And the only reason we don't know that is because of our ego minds, our left hemisphere of our brains, which plugs us in to this planet, right? It plugs us into the material, the rational, the logical. And that's fine. We need that, right? Because we've got to exist on this planet. So we have to have that hemisphere fully plugged in, for sure. But sometimes we have to bypass it. Sometimes we have to find a way through the doors of perception so that we can have this experience of God, this loving intelligence. this loving intelligence. I got a sense while on a retreat many years ago that there was nothing outside of the divine, that the divine knows who you are and everything going on in your life, that you are loved and no one is excluded from that love. You are loved beyond measure, you know, not in a sort of judgmental way that you would find in some religions, but you are just loved. You are just loved for all that you are. But we exist on a planet of duality, and so we have to find ways to marry the practical and the spiritual as well. And some people try and bypass all of the practical stuff, including the darkness on this planet, and they think that's the answer, and that isn't the answer. We can't change what we don't look at, and this planet is real enough and it needs our help, and the animals and people all need our help. And we can't go around and save the world, but we can save ourselves to the point that we show up with integrity, to the point that we show up with love, and that we can just spread that love with the people closest to us, with the animals closest to us, nurture gardens, nurture our environments as much as possible. And yes, if necessary, if you get the time, you can sign a petition, or you can go on a march, or you can get a little bit involved in a wider community as well. But the important thing, the really important thing, is that you get as aligned as possible in a heart-centered way so that you can show up with as much integrity as you can, and then forgive yourself for the times that you fall over, that you wobble, that you get it wrong, because you're human. We're all fallible. We're none of us infallible. We are all learning. Even the top gurus, right? They're still learning too, and they're not infallible either, which is why sometimes you hear that they can get into a bit of trouble and who knows what, because, you know, no one is so far above us that they are not themselves still learning something. And if anybody pretends to be, possibly best to keep a bit of a distance from that person. And if anyone seeks to disempower you, probably best to keep a distance from that person. If you've got anyone in your life that would seek to keep you small, who tries to keep you vulnerable, who tries to remind you of your vulnerabilities, be very wary of that person and their motives, because chances are they want to make you vulnerable so that you can rely on them for some reason. When you hold many answers within you, you really do. And yes, we can all have vulnerable moments. As I say, we can all do that. But you are here to learn. You are here to learn how to walk your path on your own. Ultimately, yeah, you might need a guru sometimes. You might need a teacher sometimes. You might need help sometimes. But ultimately, you are here to learn, to be your own authority eventually, you know? And that means having excellent boundaries. That means patrolling those boundaries like a sort of she-wolf, you know, making sure, because there are so many people who would seek to exploit your boundaries, whether it's a lover, or whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a work colleague, etc. There are an awful lot of exploitative people out there. So you have to learn how to take care of yourself and defend your boundaries, and how to also simultaneously stay open to the right people, to the right energies, how to drop that cloak of protection at the right times, but still retain enough common sense, enough groundedness to know how to protect yourself, and ultimately to move from darkness to light, to move from a place of not knowing who you are or why you're here, to learning why you are here, to learning that you are part of the divine, that you don't have to be enslaved by the things that enslave us on this planet, the systems that we live under. They're all a choice to some extent, you know. I know Rousseau said many years ago, man is born free, but he is everywhere in chains. And that hasn't changed. You know, he said that at the dawn of the Enlightenment. That has never changed. Our systems strangle us. They strangle our creativity and enslave us and seek, you know, only our slavish adoration, the phones that you use, the systems that you live by, the media, all of these competing interests, all of these things that want you to believe them as a really good source of information, etc. I'm sure I read a little while ago that someone said that they wanted to teach like critical thinking in schools. Something along the lines of critical analysis and critical thinking in schools. I read this only in the last couple of years. And their idea of doing that was to teach people, because they were so concerned about misinformation, right, which we've heard to death ever since COVID. But their idea of doing that was to teach people to go to like a fact-checking website or to go to the BBC. And I thought, oh God, you know, if that's going to be the critical analysis of the future, we're all in trouble. You know, if you're going to critically analyse the world, if you're going to close read the world, you have to overturn everything that you think you knew to look for the truth. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't believe anything, but it means that you analyse everything. And if something is presented to you as truth, you would look at that and go, well, is this true? And it doesn't matter the source. Some sources might seem more trustworthy than others, absolutely, but they too can be fallible for various reasons. So you have to be able to know how to close read it, how to look for biases, how to look for the various slants in what's being said and the language used in what isn't being said, but also in their sources and their reasons for their biases, if present, and so on and so forth. So many layers to it, you know. And we're taught from a young age that you have to go out and get a job and get a career, and then you try and get a house, which most people cannot afford nowadays. And so more and more young people nowadays seem to be getting a van and just going travelling because they realise that otherwise they're just part of this enslavement system. And maybe when they're 70, they'll be able to afford their own place. And maybe when they're 70, they'll be able to stop working and do what they want. So you might as well get it done when you're younger as much as you can and go and live as much as you can and as free as you can. Because freedom is so important. And we think it's a worthy sacrifice because we are given so many creature comforts by society. You know, if you are lucky enough to have a home, whether you rent or you've bought it, chances are you should be able to afford heating. You know, you don't have to really suffer in the winter, and chances are you have running water and toilet facilities and just the basics, and then you can cook inside your own home and things like this. Whereas if you go out and you live a little bit wild, chances are you're not going to have all of these amenities, and life is going to be a bit of a struggle. If you live off grid, for example, it's absolutely doable. But you have to know what you're doing, and then chances are you will be working all day, but you'll be working for yourself to live a particular lifestyle, you know. So you sacrifice the comfort, the creature comforts, for absolute sovereignty. And that's a very appealing thing for many people when they're stuck on this treadmill, when they're stuck on this sort of giant Ferris wheel that we're all on, the merry-go-round of it all, you know, that sometimes can feel very soul-destroying and very difficult if you're working in a job, especially that you don't like, that doesn't give you much freedom of expression, that doesn't give you much room for growth, that seeks to keep you small so that they can make maximum profit, you know? Mary Oliver, the poet, said, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And I love that quote. Despite the fact that, you know, I believe in reincarnation, so this is not our only rodeo on this earth. I think we've been here many, many times. Some people more than others. But still, it's precious. Your time here is precious. And how are you going to spend it? How enslaved do you want to become by the systems, you know? Chances are most people are a bit enslaved and there's not too much you can do about it. In which case you have to change your attitude, how you see it, and see it as an active choice, and then work out ways in which to change your attitude so you still feel enriched by a job that's a bit drudgery, you know? And that can be really tough going and really difficult as well. For years, when I was doing sort of menial office jobs, I'd moan and complain about it a bit and grumble. And it wasn't until some years later that it occurred to me that if this was how I was going to spend my time, regardless of if it was necessary or not, that if I was going to spend my time doing this, then I had to show up wholehearted about it. And the only way that I could do that was to choose to make it a service-oriented job. So I chose to change my attitude from one of victimhood, I wasn't a victim, my choice to be there, to one of service. And I was thinking about ways in which I could be of active service, just of service, a service in love, for love. So I just loved the heck out of people. I loved the heck out of the customers. I treated people with a bit of love, a bit of respect, a bit of care. And I tried to brighten people's day. And then when I came home, there's a sort of mental checks and balances sheet in my head. Have I enriched people's lives today? Yes. You know, how have I handled difficult situations? Have I handled them well? Yes. Then I've done okay. You know, then I've done okay. And if no, you haven't handled that situation very well, then I know how to do it better next time, and so on and so forth. Make it a learning experience, make it an experience where you actively seek to enrich other people around you. And then your whole attitude shifts, as I say, and takes you out of victimhood. And any way that you can take yourself out of victimhood is a step in the right direction, because you're not a victim. You're not a victim. As I say, you're a divine spark of God and a planet that has chosen to enslave people for millennia, unfortunately. You know? There was an interview with a Native American elder recently, and I don't remember his name, it was on YouTube. But he was talking about how, obviously, the horrors that had befallen the Native Americans in America when they were, you know, it was a genocide. And then they were moved into camps. And he just said of those times, he said, just be wary. He said, because they came for us first, but they're coming for you next. You know, and Pastor Niemoller's poem springs to mind at this juncture, doesn't it? First they came for the communists. Because the idea that this enslavement ended there, no. The very culture that was exploitative, that sought to do that, is still exploiting, is still seeking ways to keep us as small and enslaved as possible for maximum profit. This society that we live in puts profit, it puts primacy in profit over everything else, over your welfare, over the well-being of humans, of animals, of our planet, and we know it. We know it, we see it. We see it and we're all participating in it, but I believe the old ways are crumbling now. And I believe there is a spiritual renaissance happening on this planet right now. A lot of spiritual bods talk about moving from the 3D to the 5D. They say it's like being plugged into a new computer system. The 3D was a computer operating system. We're now plugged in to the 5D. And I feel like you can start to see it in the world around you, that synchronicities are happening faster. They're happening in a more spooky way, and they're happening far faster than they used to. Help and support from a spiritual perspective seems to be almost instantaneous now, as far as I can work out. And I had a mini spiritual awakening as well in the summer last year that I'm still trying to sort of work out now. I don't quite know what it was. I suspect it was kind of riding this cosmic wave that is lifting up so many people out of the 3D, out of the old ways of seeing themselves on this planet. It's helping us wake up. It's helping us wake up that we are bigger, that we are more powerful, that we are more loved, that we are loved, that we hold the divine within us. You know, what could be more beautiful than that? We don't need to endlessly consume, endlessly seek ways to distract ourselves from the mundanity of it all. We can go within, we can commune with the divine, we can align with our higher self, we can start to remember who we are, we can start to remember all sorts of things, you know, psychic gifts, for example. Since my spiritual awakening, my little mini spiritual awakening, I have the odd flashes of knowing without knowing. I have the odd flashes of intuition. And I believe that that's because of this spiritual awakening happening on the planet right now. And ultimately, it's all about love. It is all about love. You are loved beyond measure by spirit. As I say, you really are. And there's nothing you have to do to earn that love. And it doesn't mean we don't need to level up in some way, because we do. It's Earth School. We're here to learn, and it's hard and it's difficult. But when you go through the difficulty, you go through the dark night of the soul, and you come out the other side. And when you rise up again like a phoenix from the ashes, you realise that you have been given gifts, that you have gifts. And one of those gifts is just strength. Just learning that you are stronger than you could possibly imagine, that you don't need things in the outside world quite as much as you did. You don't need to lean on other people quite as heavily. The best teachers you can find are those that help you empower yourself, those that help you find the truth and the strength within that you had all along. Shamans will help you do that, because I believe that's part of the shamanic path. Because again, healing is another area where we've placed our agency outside of ourselves, and we go and see a doctor, and the doctor might look at a problem in a sort of superficial, logical way, but not in a way that's heart-centered, not in a way that's holistic. You know, if you go because you've got lung issues, for example, they're not going to say, well, those, your lung issues are to do with your grief, for example. But a holistic practitioner or an alternative healing practitioner would probably look at that sort of correlation. And I believe alternative healing is just the flip side, is just the other side of our mainstream medical healing. There's nothing wrong with mainstream medical healing, except for the fact it tells you there is something wrong that only they can cure. And very often with a pill that in itself carries side effects and problems. So I do not believe that that's the case, that is the only healing pathway in all cases. In some cases it may be, not necessarily in all cases. And I've had a few healing modalities now. I've had a few sessions with shamans and Reiki healers and light language healers, and I believe they've helped me immeasurably in many different ways. And I would recommend that to anyone. And especially if you're suffering with emotional issues, if you've got a broken heart, if you're suffering, and especially I would say for anyone, but especially if you've never done this before, if you've never thought of doing this. And if you're a guy, for example, and if you've been brought up to believe that you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, that you cannot speak out when you're suffering, when you're having problems, then I would say go and see a shaman. Because if these habits are ingrained in you, not to speak out when you need help, you know, that's a big deal. That can be quite debilitating. That can be very, very difficult to bear. Very, very difficult to deal with. So I would say try and find a shaman and see how you get on. And just see where you're guided. Because when you go and see shamans and healers that are alternative healing practitioners, you need to kind of feel into it to see where you are guided, to see what calls you, what grabs your attention, because chances are there's a reason for it, you know? It isn't necessarily like with, you know, mainstream medical help where you will go to a doctor most associated with that field, perhaps because maybe they've done the most operations or etc, etc, etc. The logical, rational sort of thinking. You have to step a bit more. Well, you don't have to. But it can help sometimes if you step more into your intuition a little bit. But if you still need logic to be your guiding principle, then go with one who looks who looks really solid from a logical perspective, who's got a really good client base, who has an awful lot of reviews, who strikes you as being down to earth, pragmatic. But I would go and keep an open mind, you know, because you never know what can happen during a session. But it can be life-changing because it can start you off on a path of discovery. And ultimately, again, a good shaman, is healing you by helping you uncover what was within. You have the healing power within you all along. They're just helping you uncover it, really. We can heal from more than we are currently led to believe, you know, and that's probably no fault of the scientific community, no fault of the medical community. It's just they have been schooled in one particular way of thinking that doesn't allow for something a little bit outside of our understanding at the moment. Hopefully they'll catch up one day, and there can be more of a marriage between the two different modalities, between the alternative healing community and mainstream healing as well. And there are so many broken people in the world, and if you're feeling a bit broken and a bit lost, as I say, go and see somebody, and sure, go and see a counsellor if you want to stick with the tried and trusted route. There's no shame there, there's no harm there, and that can be really, really helpful as well. But if you want to step into something a little bit different, and you feel ready for it, because it can open the door spiritually within you as well, that's like a side effect, then I would seek something like going to see a shaman. I really, really would, because again, it's a path back to self-empowerment. And we can all see that this year things are going to be a bit insane, like politically on our planet. So much craziness, so much insanity in this world. I wonder that we're still here as a species at all. Some days, the fragility of human life, the fragility of our own psychological makeup, that means that the people in charge of us should never be in charge of us. They're egomaniacs, they're mad, some of them. It's insane. Insanity is ruling the world, and we live in the upside down, you know. But the divine is in charge. There is a plan There's a plan for you. There's a plan for your life, and you fit into all this in ways that you cannot see, that none of us can see, that sort of dovetails nicely in terms of karma with all of our lives, which are happening simultaneously. The idea of past lives happening in the past, now it seems there's more of a consensus that actually in another plane of existence, all of our lives are happening simultaneously, which is cool. I love that idea. So yeah, in case you needed to hear this today, you are a divine, sovereign being. You are more powerful than you can imagine. If you choose to continue to give your energy to this system that governs us, this westernized system, that's fine. You know, that's your active choice. If you have no choice, but you can change your mind on how you operate within the system to empower yourself a little bit more, then I'd say do that. Anything where you think you're a victim, change that thinking. Change that thinking, and it will help you change your life. If you can get out of feeling disempowered, if you're in a relationship that makes you unhappy and you're complaining about a partner an awful lot, that does them a terrible disservice, because it's not fair to be complaining about them, and it doesn't see them for all their potential and who they are. But B, it also disempowers yourself, because you're giving them agency over you in this moment where you're complaining about them, as though they hold the keys to your happiness when they do not. You do. You hold the keys to your happiness. You are here to learn to be all that you can be and to rise into who you are, the fulfillment of all your potential as much as possible in this lifetime. And that's pretty exciting, despite what external circumstances are looking like at the moment. And despite all that, the universe is now probably conspiring to help us more than ever now as well, because we're moving into the 5D consciousness. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on to be really happy about, to really explore if you dare. You know, part of the problem is cages that we find ourselves in, but these are mental cages of our own making. And sometimes the cage can be as simple as a comfort behaviour, such as comfort eating or comfort drinking. But it's a cage nonetheless. If you've got any habits, if you've got any addictions, they're mental cages. Mental cages. If you can find a way to break through the barriers of those, sometimes that in itself takes a lifetime to learn, because so enslaved by these cages can we become, so believable and real do they feel. But they're not really. They're in part illusory too. They're an illusion we create to give ourselves distance from a problem we don't want to face in some instances. And it's a way of numbing out, not looking at the world. The world can feel too harsh, so reach for that big chocolate bar or a glass of wine or God knows what else. And these little comforting behaviours in themselves can be very powerful little stories in which we don't face the things we need to face. And sometimes those things that we need to face are just going within and slaying the demons within, slaying the dragon, you know, the metaphorical dragon, the inner part of yourself that you don't want to look at, the repository for all the things that are dark within us all. No one escapes this, and it's known as the shadow. In Jungian terms, Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, called it the shadow. And we each of us have one. And the more that you are in the world judging other people in a harsh way, the less likely you are looking at your own shortcomings, your own shadow, and thus greater your own shadow is likely to be in that moment. So we all need to do a little bit of shadow work, a little bit of psychology. We need to do a little bit of spiritual work as well. Just a little bit, and then we start a path of self-discovery. And self-discovery is huge, you know. Plato said, know thyself, and it's the basis upon which everything else rests. If you know yourself and you like yourself and you have enough self-respect, you will treat yourself well and you will ensure that others do too, and you will not stand for it if they don't. And then you can nourish and care for yourself as you would a good friend. So these are exciting times we live in spiritually. Interesting times. Destabilizing times as well. Because even if you're a bit spiritual and you think you know what's going on, if you start to have spiritual gifts come online, as it were, it can still feel a bit discombobulating, a little bit destabilizing, and especially if your consciousness is expanding a little bit, that can feel a bit weird as well. And if you're suddenly getting psychic gifts and downloads and God knows what else, that can sort of scramble your noodle a little bit as well, you know. And spiritual stuff, it isn't always what we think. We think about the bliss of the oneness, the bliss of the divine. But sometimes when we level up spiritually, that means we must undergo harsher tests in order to ensure that we are ponying up, that we are coming to the table with as much integrity as possible. Because the more spiritual we become, the more we become aware of this wider, this other realm, the more integrity we have to carry. And so spirit comes along and it will test you, you know. Only somebody yesterday, actually, on a message board online, in a spiritual group, they came along and they said, "What is an initiation? I don't want it." And people were responding in various ways. They said, "I don't want it." They said, "I want to know exactly what's going on at all times. I don't want to be tested in this way. You know, that's really not fair. That's not a nice thing. That's not, you know." But again, that's the ego talking. That's the ego talking. No one wants an initiation, but sometimes initiations have to happen. And they can be very dark and very destabilizing, but it's a test. How well do you stand? How well do you walk your talk? How well can you still love even if you've been brought to your knees? There's all sorts of ways in which we're initiated. And for a shaman undergoing an initiation, it can be a life-changing event. Very often shamans will encounter dark nights of the soul, whether they're having a terrible emotional time of it or sometimes physical, and sometimes for years. Some of them will have near-death experiences. Some of them will have a mystery illness. And it's in their fight and their battle to come back to health within themselves that they learn the gifts of the spirit, and they are bestowed with these gifts. The greater the gift, the greater the difficulty that you must go through in some instances. Because how can you be a healer of other people if you haven't undergone difficulties yourself, and so on and so forth? So I see the initiation as a blessing. It's a blessing. It's a test, and it's a blessing. No one wants it. Probably nobody wants to be tested in this way. And yet it's a blessing and a gift, because the gift as well is that when you go through this dark night of the soul and you are squeezed beyond what you thought you could endure, but you come out the other side, then you realise you've got wings, and you had wings all along. But you could have never have had such big and magnificent wings had you not been tested as much as you were. You had to endure the darkness. You had to endure the tests to discover the true strength and the true beauty of what lies within. So take heart that you are not just this little materialistic being running around. You're just not this little material being. You're not this little, human being. You are a soul inhabiting this human body for a time. And people who have near-death experiences, and you can find many of them on YouTube, they all recount that it's the shortest duration. Truly, when you get to the other side, it's like the blink of an eye. So perspectives shift, when we're here and we're enduring and we're going, oh my God, how can we put up with this? It's so hard, it's so horrible, it's going on for so long. But when you get to the other side, eternal life, this human duration is just the blink of an eye, truly. And there is so much beauty, and we can experience some of it when we start to meditate. We start to work with the divine, and we start to co-create with the divine. And then magic happens, and then we realize we were never alone. And then the magic of synchronicity, the right person, the right place, the right time, the right event, even in small little ways. You're just guided to take a different path to work, and then maybe you might see the most magnificent sunrise and just feel touched by spirit in that moment. And for many people, angel numbers, so you might look at a clock when you feel particularly inspired by something. Maybe there's a song that you're listening to that just makes your heart soar, and you just feel in that moment that you're not alone, that you've got spirit with you. And then you look at the clock and maybe it's 1:11 on the clock, or maybe it's 4:44 or something like that. And you look up the corresponding angel number, and you just get a hint that spirit is with you. The more you step into that world, the more you get these hints, you know? The more you realise that this world is not what we have been taught, not at all. Well, it is in part, but only half the story. We've been given half the story. We haven't been taught about the magic of the divine. Not really. Not really, as I say, because if we all became empowered tomorrow, realised our own divinity, realised that we're eternal beings having a human experience, we'd consume a heck of a lot less, right? We wouldn't be so useful. We'd probably be a little bit harder to enslave as well. But luckily for us, spirit is running around, waking us up anyway. So I think we're in for an interesting few years on planet Earth, potentially. I think more and more people are going to awaken. And that's a good thing, because these systems that we live under have become too greedy, have become too corrupt, too cruel. Too cruel. Here in the UK at the moment, our government is not fit for purpose, in my opinion, just for the opinions it seems to hold collectively on our poor and our disabled alone. You know, the measure of how progressive a society is, how much progress it has made, is not simply materialistic pursuits. It isn't just simply in science or technology, not at all. It's in how well it looks after those with the least, the poor, the elderly, the disabled. If a society really takes care of its people and animals too, and cherishes them, then that's a decent society. It's got some priorities, it's got some honour, it's got some kindness, it's got some compassion. And these are the values we've got to strive to bring back. Because modern day life wants to eradicate the hell out of most of those. Throw in a healthy dose of creativity as well, because we're such creative beings. And part of the reason people feel so depressed, I suspect, is because modern day life sucks the soul out of life. It sucks the creativity out, it sucks the joy out, and it's our jobs collectively to remember that we've got so much power to create our own stories, that we've got so much power to create anything we want, and that we must create because it's good for the soul. It's another way to help us remember the divinity within as well, in some cases. So I hope you have a good week. I hope you find a moment to meditate. I hope you find a moment to remember the divinity within you. And I hope you find a moment to realise that you matter. You really matter, that you're important, that you are needed here on planet Earth, that your being here really matters. So yeah, have a good week. Take care. God bless.